Welcome to Lesson 7.3. Today we're going to talk side length and area of similar figures. Our learning objectives: being able to recognize the ratio of corresponding side lengths of similar figures as the scale factor, being able to use proportions to find unknown measures of corresponding parts of similar figures, using diagrams of similar figures to unknown lengths and area without directly measuring. Here's our introductory problem. Make sure you read through that before moving on. So we can use a scale factor to help us to determine unknown measures. We don't use the scale factor alone, we apply it to the proportion. If we know the length of a side in one figure, we can use the scale factor to find the measure of the corresponding side in a similar figure. So let's take a look at how that works. So we have triangle ABC. So if I were to draw triangle ABC, okay, we've got A, B, C. And now side A, which is going to be across from angle A, it corresponds to side X in XYZ. So if I get X, Y, Z, I'll have X, Y, and Z. Okay, so this side length corresponds to this one. And they're telling us that side X is 4 meters long, and the scale factor, so to get from one to the other, is 6. And that tells me I need to multiply by 6. So to figure out the length of A, I take my side length of 4, multiply it by my scale factor of 6, giving me 24, and my label is meters. So now we're going to use the scale factor of similar figures to find the measure of KJ. KJ is the red line here. Well, they don't outright give us the scale factor, but what they do give us is a pair of corresponding sides. So they tell us that 4 goes with 6. So if I did 6 over 4, that would get me 1.5 or 1.5. This is my scale factor. So in order to get side KJ, I take the corresponding side of 5, and I'm going to multiply it by 1.5 to get me my side length. Well, 5 times 1.5 gets me 7.5, and our label is inches. Sometimes you can figure out the missing side lengths by looking at the given measures. In the last example, it was too tricky because we couldn't see the relationship between 6 and 4. However, this isn't always the case. Always look at the diagram of the figures to see if you can determine the missing length without measuring. So if I have these two rectangles here, my corresponding sides are 4 and 8, 3 and 6, and 3 and 6. It's pretty obvious what our scale factor is at this point. I just need to double everything. Double, double. Okay, double. Okay, that didn't take a whole lot of figuring out to do. So in order to find my missing side length, I would need to multiply it by 2 to get 8. Well, what number do I multiply by 2 to get 8? 4. And that's going to be in inches. So sometimes we don't need to figure out the scale factor by writing it out. We can just see it with using the numbers. So now we're given these two triangles are similar. And we're told to find the area of each triangle. Well, an area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. Well, in this first triangle, in triangle GHI, I can find that right away. 1/2 times 8 times 6. If I do that, I get an area of 24 square inches. For the other triangle, JKL, I don't know the height. Okay, so I can fill in everything else, but I'm looking for this measure right here. So in order to do that, I look at scale factors. Well, what 10 goes with 15, 8 goes with 12. What do I multiply to get from one to the other? Well, I can take 15 divided by 10 and get 1.5. And if I did 12 divided by 8, I'd get the same answer of 1.5. So to get my missing side length, I take the side corresponding to it of 6, and I multiply it by 1.5. And if I type that in, I get a measure of 9 inches. So I'm going to multiply that by 9. So 1/2 times 12 times 9 gives me an area of 54 square inches. So my two areas are 24 square inches and 54 square inches. Here's our beginning of the section problem again. Make sure to read through that before moving on. here's the answer to the problem. Make sure you read through that before moving on. So for review, when comparing similar figures, make sure that your proportions have the corresponding parts of the figures compared in the corresponding parts of the ratios. A proportion is two ratios that are equal to each other, and the scale factor is the ratio that determines the proportional relationship between the sides of similar figures.